everyone, it is Kate here for a sort of discussion video on some thoughts I have been having on reading classics in the recent days and weeks. And the first question I want to have to pose to you is that, do you feel that classics are one-size-fits-all books? I think up until a couple years ago I would have said yes, and that people should just read every single classic that comes their way. You should give every classic a try, and you should read it until the very end, and you will come out having some merit, having read it. And I think I have changed my mind on that, and I think as I read and mature as a reader, I am much more coming to know even better. Like, I thought I knew my reading taste, and then I started BookTube, and I'm just reading so much more and getting more of an idea of exactly what I like as a reader. And I know I did a sort of DNFing video in the fall, and I talked about The Great Gatsby, and I read The Great Gatsby, but I hated it. I talked about East of Eden, which I DNF'd halfway through, and then I talked about, what was the other one? The Count of Monte Cristo, which I could tell was quote-unquote not for me. And I think I just have decided that I can either keep reading these classics and kind of dread my reading session every single day, which it sounds ridiculous when I put it that way, right? Or I can read the classics that are suited to me. I think I had in my mind this idea that just all classics will be extremely hard to read, and I just need to power through. But then the more that I read classics I love, I realize, no, that's actually not the case for me. There are some classics where the reading comes extremely easy, and I really have changed my mind that there are one-size-fits-all books. And so one book that comes to mind is Sylvia's Lovers by Elizabeth Gaskell. This is one that just swept me away, and I had no trouble plowing right through it. It just really spoke to my soul, and I loved it and adored it so very much. But then I know good friends of mine who are just having a lot of trouble with the dialect. And then on the flip side, I am really struggling with War and Peace. I think I've decided I'm just going to try to finish it by 2018. So I'm really struggling with War and Peace. But then those same friends who were really struggling with Sylvia's Lovers just plowed right through War and Peace. And so it's really interesting to me, just books strike us all in different ways. And I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all book, even with classics. I wish that was the case, because I do like to consider myself educated and well-rounded and cultured, but I think it's just coming to the point where there are certain books that I know I will come to the end of and think, why did I spend all that time reading it? And I think The Great Gatsby, which is a much shorter one, so it's much less of a commitment, but A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, I still am like, I hate that book. That's what I came out of it thinking. And so I think as I mature and grow as a reader, I should kind of trust my reading taste more and trust my gut feeling about books. And the two books that have recently triggered this are two from my Spring TBR, so spoiler alert for the wrap up for my Spring TBR. The first is Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott, and I wanted to read this because I wanted to be in the fan club with Betsy Ray from the Betsy Tacy series. She loves this book. She loves this story. Now, I started Ivanhoe a couple weeks ago, and I was really jolted, taken aback by the language. It's very different. It's very archaic sounding. It's very dense. But I was giving myself a pep talk. It's okay, Kate. Just take it slowly. Really, read it slowly. It's gonna be okay. You don't have to rush through all books. You can savor classics and take your time. In addition to that, though, it is very, very plot-based and not very character-based at all. I had such high hopes for Ivanhoe because it just looks so romantic, and it'll take you off to this other world. And I think that's what I was hoping to get out of Ivanhoe. But now as I'm saying this, I realize I can get that from fantasy, and that kind of escapism I can get from fantasy. And it was such a grind. Every time I sat down to read it, I felt so unmotivated, and I was reading it so slowly. And when it comes down to it, if the language is going to be archaic and dense, that's one thing. But then I realized it's very not character-driven writing. It's very plot-based. So I would love to watch the movie of this, but not read it. And I think I'm okay saying that. I think I'm okay saying Ivanhoe is not for me. It does not suit my personality. I know my reading personality well enough that I can be okay not reading all classics that come my way. I can say it just wasn't for me. I got about 70 pages in and it was just slowing my reading down. I'm not willing to have that, to have then, well, I read one book this month, Ivanhoe, and I was miserable the whole time I read it. It's one thing to read one book, you know, I read one book, Ivanhoe. It took me a long time, but it was so much fun and it was so enlightening, and it didn't feel that way. So I decided Ivanhoe's not for me. But also then a little thought that I had as I was reading this happens with many books that I end up DNFing. I sort of have this existential reader crisis, and I want to know if you guys have this too, where as I'm reading it and I'm not enjoying it, I'm bored and I'm like checking social media on my phone or like loading the dishwasher and, you know, doing everything but. I have this existential crisis, like, do I like reading? I thought I liked reading and I'm really bored with this and I can't pay attention. And I start panicking about my whole entire reading life and my existence as a reader. And it's so funny because it's just one book that's boring me will do that. And I just wanted to know if anybody else had that. And so then I need to have a good book as sort of like antidote to that boredom. So I'm sorry, Ivanhoe, but I think I'm not going to read you. I don't think I'm going to get rid of this because I'm not going to say never about Ivanhoe, but definitely not now. Okay. And definitely not now because I'm reading War and Peace. Like I said, I'm really struggling with it. So I only want to have one big classic that I'm really struggling with at the same time going. So now another one of my Spring TBR that I'm like for the win. This is a classic, but it feels so easy to read, and that is Daniel Deronda by George Eliot. Where I liked Middlemarch, I think I will love Daniel Deronda. And I don't know why it took me so long to try it out. I've seen the miniseries of both Middlemarch and Daniel Deronda, and for some reason I thought the book of Middlemarch would appeal to me more. But I actually think I will love Daniel Deronda. So I am 70 pages into Daniel Deronda, and it has been some of the most fun reading I've had this year. The main character of Gwyneth, who wants to have happiness in this life and wants to kind of seek her fortune in the world, is so fascinating. She is like such a puzzle to me, and I love reading about her. Like, she's so interesting to me, and there is so few parts in this that have dragged thus far, and I am just really impressed by it, and it has really captivated and piqued my interest more than Middlemarch, which I wasn't expecting at all. I was honestly, when I held this up for my Spring TBR saying that I wanted to read this, I was really nervous because it is a bigger book, and so I was nervous that I wasn't going to like it. But I'm telling you, Victorian literature, I'm realizing, is like my comfort zone with classics. So I am really enjoying this. And so, you know, I was having this big like existential reader crisis, like, oh my gosh, do I not like reading at all? Why can't I like reading? I have a booktube, I'm supposed to like reading, and being such a like drama queen about it. And it's just, no, I just don't like that specific book. So I picked this book up and I am enjoying it much more. So let me know if you kind of have a crisis when you're reading a book and you don't like it, about whether you actually like reading, and then you have to reassure yourself with a new book. But I have changed the rules for classics. Some classics are not for me, and I can tell from the very beginning. So I think War and Peace is going to end up being like Les Mis, where it's very, very challenging the entire time that I'm reading it, but then it's going to be like a great reading memory when I'm finished. That's what I'm telling myself. Fingers crossed that actually happens. So I hope this resonated with you guys. It made sense, and I hope you enjoyed hearing about it, and I will see you guys for another video soon. Bye.